Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. President Biden spars with Republicans over economic policy. NTD's Iris Tao has more on the latest debate from the White House.
As midterms are just now 18 days away, President Biden touts a student loan cancellation program, which could actually start canceling debt in people's account as soon as this Sunday.
It's easy to apply as signing up while hanging out with your friends or at home and watching a movie. The vast majority are applying on their phones.
Biden's Friday speech comes after the Supreme Court rejected an emergency appeal seeking to block the program. Also on Thursday, a federal court rejected a separate lawsuit brought by 6 Republican-led states. The states argued that the program would cost too much taxpayer money, adding that Biden overstepped his authority as he didn't get approval from Congress in taking such sweeping action. Biden, meanwhile, halts the program.
Less than a week, just close to 22 million people have already given us information to consider this life-changing relief.
And early on Friday, Biden also touted what he called historic deficit reduction.
The largest one-year drop in American history, $1.4 trillion decline in the deficit.
While Biden's eager to applaud it, conservatives point out that the drop is largely due to expiration of the massive spending programs that Biden approved during the pandemic. And House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy suggested in an interview this week that if Republicans reclaim the majority, they may be willing to use the debt limit as leverage to force spending cuts. And that gives Biden a new reason to attack Republicans. Here's what he said today.
They will crash the economy next year by threatening the full faith and credit of the United States, for the first time in our history, putting the United States in default unless we yield to their demand to cut Social Security and Medicare.
Republicans, meanwhile, have denied such claims, saying what they want is responsible and sustainable spending. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
The Pentagon will fund travel for troops and their dependents seeking abortions. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin outlined the agency's new policy. It will apply to service members and their dependents based in states where abortions are now illegal. That means travel expense to a state where abortion is legal will be federally funded. President Joe Biden has been vocal in his support for federally funded abortions. Biden has recently said that he supports funds for taking time off from work and child care for those obtaining an abortion. He's also urged private companies to provide similar funding. The Biden administration could subject some of Elon Musk's ventures to national security reviews. This is according to Bloomberg, citing people familiar with the matter. Sources say Biden administration officials are beginning to discuss such reviews. They would cover the SpaceX Starlink satellite network and Musk's deal with Twitter. Twitter shares reacted to the news, dropping as much as 8% today. Biden officials appear to be concerned that Musk threatened to cut off the Starlink satellite service to Ukraine due to the expense and his plans to buy Twitter with foreign investors. And according to a report by the Washington Post, Elon Musk plans to lay off 75% of Twitter employees after he takes over Twitter. The paper also cites anonymous sources familiar with the matter. Today, a federal court sentenced former Trump advisor Steve Bannon to 4 months in prison. A former chief counsel to Senator Chuck Grassley said the underlying ruling could ultimately hurt President Biden. NTD's Arlene Richards reports.
So, as you know, Mr. Bannon was sentenced today.
Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon is facing 4 months in prison and a $6,500 fine. But his attorney said he will be appealing the conviction of 2 counts of contempt of Congress. The judge delayed the prison term until after the appeal process. Bannon's attorney David Schoen said the judge's decision to delay the sentence was extraordinary but appropriate. He said there are substantial issues left open in the case.
I believe that the appeal in this case is bulletproof. The constitutional issues involved in this case are very important, but Mr. Bannon never got to tell the reasons for his actions with respect to the subpoena.
Schoen said the government prohibited Bannon from presenting evidence that would explain why he didn't testify before the House January 6 committee. Mike Davis, former chief counsel for Senator Chuck Grassley, explained what happened.
He was instructed by his counsel that President Trump asserted executive privilege, and so therefore he could not testify. That is an absolute legal defense, and the district court judge, for some reason, would not allow him to raise that defense. And I think the district court judge misinterpreted a D.C. Circuit Court ruling.
Davis, also founder and president of the Article 3 Project, said the D.C. Circuit is mostly Obama appointees, so he expects this case to ultimately go to the Supreme Court.
This goes to the heart of the separation of powers. If a president is concerned that his top advisors will get hauled before courts or Congress, that seriously damages the presidency.
He said this case is bigger than President Trump or Steve Bannon.
What happens when Congress calls President Biden's son Hunter to testify about his discussions with his father as president? President Biden will want to assert executive privilege, and he's just trashed that because of Trump and Steve Bannon.
Meanwhile, Bannon told NTD he plans to continue his podcast War Room while in prison, and he made a prediction.
On November 8th, there's going to have judgment on the illegitimate Biden regime, and quite frankly, Nancy Pelosi and the entire committee.
Arlene Richards, NTD News, New York.
And we have more updates on the FBI's raid on former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. The battle over presidential records continues. Trump claims 15 documents that were kept there, including clemency requests, are his personal property and should not be handed to the federal government. That's the latest from a filing with the Department of Justice. A special master is reviewing Trump's claims of executive privilege over the roughly 22,000 documents. Trump's team and the Justice Department will continue to work through everything over the coming month, with the special master set to make determinations by mid-December. And today, the House January 6th committee announced they have subpoenaed Trump to testify and provide documents. The panel is asking for the documents by November 4th and asking that he testify on or around November 14th. Since the start of the lockdowns, the state of Florida has seen a deluge of blue state residents flocking to the state, seeking in-person learning for their children and less COVID-19 restrictions. Florida's Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo was tasked with keeping Floridians safe throughout the pandemic. He's just penned a book where he talks about some of his experiences. We had a chance to ask him about it. Here's a look. Dr. Joseph Ladapo, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. Really happy to be joining you guys today.
Doctor, there's a lot I'd like to ask you, but first I have to ask you about your new book, Transcend Fear. Very fascinating read. What motivated you to write this book, and what do you hope readers will take away from it?
Well, really the core motivation was the reason was a candidate for this position of Surgeon General, which frankly was my own personal transformation from someone who was extremely fearful and lived in just an atmosphere, an immersive atmosphere of fear in terms of how I approached every single thing in my life, to someone who is as far removed from that as possible, free of the fear and able to do things that I would not have been able to do if I was still living in the prior paradigm. And that happened for me right before the pandemic, and it allowed me to do things in the pandemic like write and talk and communicate to people in an effective way that would have been impossible without having that experience of going through working with a former Navy SEAL and going through stuff related to Chinese medicine and meridian theory to get rid of the fear that I was carrying around. And that was why I was even considered a candidate for the Surgeon General position by the governor. So that for people to be able to, who want more, to be able to access more of what they want for their own lives, that's the primary motivation for the book.
Well, I think one thing readers will also get to know is that you are highly credentialed, graduating from Harvard Medical School. How important was it for you to have diverse opinions and robust discussion among doctors and scientists when it came to your studies and also COVID-19? And why do you think we saw kind of a stifling of these things of sorts?
Well, it's so important, and yeah, I was fortunate to go to medical school at Harvard, which was a terrific medical school, and I also completed a PhD in health policy and gained expertise with research methods while I was in graduate school. So that was obviously extremely helpful for the pandemic, both early on and up to this very day, in terms of helping shape policies that are actually in the public's interest rather than in the interests of some political ideology or some pharmaceutical company, which is unfortunately most of what we've been seeing. But it's really important. Debate, inquiry, open communication, where people aren't worried that their heads are going to be cut off if they say the wrong thing, which again, unfortunately, is what we've seen during the pandemic. That's critical for the search for truth. You can't find it without it. And it's important, it's valuable.
Doctor, do you find that there may be a lot of doctors out there that agree with you in private, but tend to keep silent in public in fear of any type of, retribution or losing their medical license?
Oh, that's factually true. I can't tell you how often I hear supportive messages from doctors who say they really appreciate what I'm doing, that what I'm saying, that I'm being outspoken about. Because ultimately, most of what I've said has just been, no, here are the data. There's really been nothing profound that I've said. It's mostly just been pointing to the data and all the data, not just the data that agrees with the CDC's agenda, So I have so many messages from so many doctors. And the other thing they often say is that, wish I could say something, but I can't say something. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. Or people are just scared because they don't want the negative attention. I mean, you see how media have come after me after the Florida Department of Health did the study of Florida data and found an increased risk of cardiac death among young men. I mean, it's been crazy. It's almost been this just explosive tantrum in terms of the types of critiques from every which way that have come. And a lot of people don't want to deal with that, and I cannot blame them, because it's not something I think most people are prepared for to deal with. But absolutely, it's this really negative attention that follows unpopular stances or findings that is the main reason why you don't hear from more doctors publicly.
Well, congratulations on the new book, Transcend Fear. Dr. Joseph Ladapo, thank you.
Hey, thank you. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at EpochTV.com.